If you're onboarding new customers by hand, I'm sorry, but you're still living in the early 2000s and you're still faxing out an onboarding questionnaire and getting someone to fax it back. You need an upgrade. Taking an accountancy firm as an example, I'm going to show you how you can drop your onboarding down from 3 to 5 hours to just 60 seconds. And it's all done automatically. Let's dive in. So going back to the example of using an accountancy firm, how do you go about onboarding a new customer? So we've got this workflow that you get a new client. So basically this could be lead gen, however you do it. As an example, we send them a payment link, say you've got an admin fee for onboarding or to get up and running with a customer. So you can set that up so it automatically redirects to the client onboarding form and you can then trigger the workflow off that. So this is all automatic. So that'll redirect automatically on a successful payment and then you've got the start process of this automation. So what we've got is you create your folder and start assets. One of these things could be a checklist to make sure that, someone can review it to make sure everything's done and dusted as needs be. You can create draft documents. So for example, you've got a welcome letter. I believe accountants have sort of previous supplier notification letters. So if you've got templates that you can use them. They'll pull them automatically using AI. Set up in some software. So for this example, I'm just giving Xero. So I use Xero for my own business and I know a lot of accountants use that to manage client data. And then this bit isn't really done in the workflow I'm going to show you, but then you allocate it to a team. They do the onboarding review using the checklist that we've created up here. And you can also add in things like emails, welcome emails that everything's been done by this automation and checked off. So how does that work in the real world? Well, we've got this form, our onboarding form. It's just got some basic questions, your full name, your company name, contact email, address, previous supplier name and address, and then the submission date. One thing to note, because we are using N8N as our workflow tool, they don't have a direct way to monitor Google Forms, but you can use a thing called a webhook that will then send new submissions from Google Forms to this workflow and then do all the onboarding for you. So just a little bit of information on that. To set up this inside a Google form, you just go to these app scripts. So the little drop down menu, you do app scripts. This will open this editor. And then previously I've just created this code.js file. And you paste in this piece of code. The post URL, you update it so you can get that from inside the webhook. You can just copy that in there. And then what you can do is paste all this in. This will send it over to an A10, the workflow that you want. The only other thing you need to make sure you set up is this thing called a trigger. So the little clock icon, if you click triggers, and you can do add a trigger. And then it'll open this edit trigger for the onboarding webhook form. You want to make sure it's on submit. That'll be by default. Leave that as default head. Select event source from form, but what it defaults to is an open. But on this one, you want to do on form submit. What I like to do as well, this normally does, I think this is defaulted to daily, but I always like to set this, notify me immediately if there's any onboarding notification issues. So that's the sort of setup to make sure that a form can trigger to an A10. On the back of that, we then have this Google Drive that has the onboarding clients. So this is where we store information relating to who's completed a submission. We have the templates. So going back to the workflow, this will be the checklist. And then so the welcome letter, supplier notification, that was this section. And then client assets. So this is going to be a folder that's going to populate all the sort of documents that are needed to be completed or can be uploaded by customers. And we're going to create new folders per customer, per form submission in here. So you've got a way to manage that. So how does that look in N8N? Well, the form submission comes in, new client details go into the spreadsheet, create an asset folder in here. We get the template. We use OpenAI, ChatGPT, and a prompt I've put together, just a quick and dirty prompt to create the documents from the templates. And then we're going to save it into this new folder that we've created. So how does that work? What I'm going to do is I'm just going to pop over to a different screen to complete a form, and then this will trigger it on. So what I'll do is I'll do test workflow. That'll sit there waiting, and I'll go and complete the form. Okay, so I've completed all the details. I'm just submitting the form. There we go, it's picked up. So I've got a new form submission. So I'm creating the client details. It's doing the assets. We've got the draft welcome letter. It's now saving it. It's now doing the getting the notification template, drafting that letter, saving that, and it's going to save the checklist as well. One thing just to note on this one is I had the zero link on the other workflow. Here I've got a link to zero, but it's to my business account. It's not an actual accountancy package, so I've just disabled it in here. So that's all run. So now if we go back to the client assets and the onboarding clients, so we've got the information coming. Now the reference comes from this execution actually has an ID. So that's the execution ID. What you can do for this is when we are creating a client, we could create a unique piece of code that will create that depending on what you use for your business, and then it integrates seamlessly into what you're doing already. So that's the reference we're keeping. But then if we go back into the client assets as well, we've got a new folder. So 16439, and it's created the welcome letter. So this will probably just use a template. Supply notification. Cool. And then it's also got a checklist. And this is just empty, but whatever you're putting in your checklist in the spreadsheet copies this over from the template, so that will all be good. So in the matter of seconds, we've actually created everything we need using AI to onboard a customer and get everything ready. Some future stuff that you can do on this, you can actually then perhaps create a subfolder in the assets folder, give access to the person who submitted the form so they can go and upload information as needed. Again, we can do things that we mentioned about team allocations, things like that, posting to a Slack message or Microsoft Teams, notifying them. You can also do things like email follow-ups as well. So you could say, oh, thank you, we've got all your details. We're going to do a checklist. You're going to be assigned to Sharon and she's going to reach out to you in the next few days to make sure everything's up and running. So there's a lot more you can do to this depending on what your business does currently. But that's how easy it is to take a sort of 3, 4, 5, 6 hour process down to around 60 seconds and let sort of the customer actions drive the process. If you want help setting this up in your business, reach out to me. I'm more than happy to chat more about it. Also, as well, going back to this script, if you do want a copy of this as well, just reach out to me. I'll ping it over to you, no problem at all. You might like this other video where I've also used N8N to create my own AI-based virtual assistant. I no longer need to hire virtual assistants.